It first appeared in flashes. Obscure pieces of scrambled porn watched in the dead of night at my grandmother's house. Inexplicable tingling sensations whenever I would see that one boy in the hallway at school. Pages and pages of erotic fiction on a flickering computer screen scrolling past my 14-year-old eyes. The snickers and sneers when it became evident that I had a crush, and it always was obvious, cloaked in my inability to disguise my emotions. "You're not allowed to like him," they jeered, and my face flushed red with humiliation. I thought about sex. I wrote about it, read about it, knew the ins and outs, so to speak, about it. And somewhere along the way, I began to believe that I would never have it. Sex wasn't for people like me. Even if I wanted to, no one would ever want to have sex with me, an autistic woman. Would they? In 1975, the World Health Organization defined sexuality as, quote, an integral part of the personality of everyone, man, woman, and child. It is a basic need and an aspect of being human that cannot be separated from other aspects of human life. Sexuality is not synonymous with sexual intercourse, and it influences thoughts, feelings, actions, and interactions, and thereby our mental and physical health, end quote. But somewhere along the way, a stigma built up around the sexuality and sexual expression of autistic people. The world decided that this definition didn't apply to us, and society overall doesn't like the thought of autistic people getting laid, shagging, screwing, copulating, doing the horizontal mambo. The euphemisms are many, but the opportunities are sadly few. Somehow, it became easier to think of autistic people as sexless, uninterested and repulsed by the idea of sex, which in and of itself is a departure from the narrative that grows up around other disabled populations, which are often viewed as being overly sexual. But to act as though having sexual desires and thoughts is something that doesn't happen is to deny autistic people a huge part of the human experience. It is for this reason and so many others that we need to dramatically shift the dialogue around autism and sexuality from stop to go. Any parent of a teenager will tell you that one of their greatest fears is having that birds and the bees talk with their child. One idea that persists, despite its overwhelming erroneousness, is that if a teenager has the slightest sexual knowledge, they will then go out and have sex. Individuals on the autism spectrum who are given thorough information about sex are no more likely than anyone else to go out and fall headfirst into an orgy. But where neurotypical people can more easily learn the social ropes and the dynamics of navigating romantic and sexual relationships, autistic people struggle to read these vital cues and are much more likely to end up in vulnerable situations and to be victimized both physically and emotionally. This is why it is so important for individuals on the spectrum to have access to accurate, straightforward information about sex. The idea that there is a right way to have sex or to be sexual is another misconception that won't quietly die. The experience of sex, mentally, emotionally, and physically, is different for every person. And while the sensory issues that many autistic individuals face may alter how they have sex, it doesn't mean that they don't have it at all. The first time that I had sex, I was 22 years old. I had plenty of information, or so I thought, from my years of erotic fan fiction writing and college pseudo-threesomes. Yes, that's the thing. Ask me how. But as I lay there in a tiny Seattle apartment on that blue velvet Tommy Hilfiger comforter, 2 glasses of the wine I'd picked out left forgotten on the coffee table, the white button-down shirt I'd asked him to wear lying in a crumpled heap on the floor because I'd always dreamed of unbuttoning a guy's shirt before we were about to make love, and wearing a University of Washington Huskies cheerleader uniform in a girl's size 14 after previously being naked, I realized how deeply unprepared I truly was. It hurt. Me, 5 feet tall, and him 6'5", his wall of endless torso looking me in the face. Somehow, a fitting metaphor for not being able to see the true face of the person that I had fallen in love with. After it was over, he scurried to the bathroom to wash up, one of the many red flags that I failed to register, and I threw open my bedroom window and shouted into the frigid February night, "I am no longer a virgin! Do you hear that, Seattle?" I thought that he would hold me as we fell asleep, the quiet, affirming soreness still throbbing between my legs, But he turned away. I watched his back rise and fall, too anxious to close my eyes, lest he suddenly change his mind. He didn't. Before that night, I decided that I had to know if I'd done a good job. He was more experienced, despite being 2 years younger, and I feared that my lack of time in the field would adversely affect my performance. So, in some inspired fit of autism-fueled wisdom, I reckoned that if hotels and restaurants could have comment cards for you to fill out, why couldn't I? A sexual intercourse comment card. Made in all complete seriousness and with tongue firmly implanted in cheek. And the questions on the back, of course. What did you think could have been better? What did you enjoy most about this session? What didn't happen that you would like to have happen again? Please rate the following from 1 to 5. The outfit I had on, my facial expressions during intercourse, my vocal volume. Is there anything I can do in the future to get you aroused more quickly? Valid and useful information, all of it. But there's a problem with these questions. One that I didn't see, that I couldn't see until I later learned that there's a fundamental difference between having sex and someone having sex with you. Every single one of these questions is about him, his enjoyment, his satisfaction. There is not a word, not a syllable about my enjoyment, about whether or not I liked all the things that he did. My pleasure in this instance wasn't simply secondary, it just did not exist. So I didn't have that knowledge of sex. My parents and I never had that birds and the bees talk, which I almost feel cheated out of now in a bizarre way. And what I have found as I've waded into the murky and sometimes alligator-infested waters of sexuality, instruction, and disability is that there are many barriers to establishing that conversation and to teaching dating skills to autistic people. As a candidate for my master's degree in ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis, I built my thesis around teaching adult men diagnosed with autism how to ask someone out on a date. The behavior analysis research literature that I had to draw from contained innumerable studies about teaching social skills to autistic individuals, but nothing related to dating skills. Not one study. And the plethora of participants that I was sure I would have were also non-existent, with it taking me 2 years to find just 2 participants. Turns out nobody really likes to have their dating skills critiqued. Who would have thought? There's still such a taboo around this topic that it is difficult, if not impossible, to get funding for these types of studies. Never mind that dating is not one skill, it's many, many skills, almost all of which are complex and confusing and hard as hell to understand for someone who isn't on the autism spectrum, let alone someone who is. Further complicating the equation is the damned if you do it, damned if you don't do it factor with a sexist double standard chaser. Oh no, he wants to have sex? Oh, that can't happen, that's not acceptable. He doesn't want to have sex? What's wrong with him? Something must be wrong. But if you flip it and reverse it, she doesn't want to have sex. Oh, that's okay, that's perfectly fine. There is also a presumption of heterosexuality among autistic individuals, which presents additional difficulties for people on the spectrum who identify as LGBT or asexual. Having a cultural and/or religious stigma against their orientation or gender identity often precludes these individuals from being able to express themselves in a safe and healthy way. Clearly, it is incredibly harmful and dehumanizing to exclude autistic individuals who have desires and who want to have sex from sexual experiences. We know that, but now the question becomes, what can we do about it? How do we make it okay for someone like me to say, I'm autistic and I have sex, without pearls being clutched and furniture stores having a run on fainting couches? To shift the paradigm, to reshape our perception of autism and sexuality, we need more research. If behavior analysts can do preference assessments for Skittles versus M&Ms, they can do them for hugging versus kissing, touching on the arm versus touching on the face, and so on. And we need to have not only more studies on sexuality with autistic participants, but we need studies on sexuality with autistic researchers. Include us in the process. See us not as children needing to be taught, but as who we are, intelligent, capable adults who want to engage in this discussion as equals among you. And from this research, there may come new supports that can help autistic individuals embrace their sexuality, from the physical, such as learning how to masturbate appropriately, to the emotional, learning how to establish intimacy with someone, which should happen far prior to anything else, because, after all, sex begins long before sex begins, as the saying goes. We must create supports that neither overly eroticize nor infantilize, hand puppets for a 30-year-old, autistic people's sexuality, and that meet them exactly where they are and at the level that best fits their specific needs. Perhaps most obvious, and yet least considered, is finally acknowledging autistic individuals as sexual beings, recognizing that we have the capacity for sex, for pleasure, for play. Change your ideas about autism and you can change the world. And when this all comes to pass, when we as autistic people realize that we alone control access to our bodies and ultimately our sexual destinies, and when we have the information needed to make informed choices, then we will be complete. Empowered confidence is an unstoppable force, a chin up, chest out kind of feeling that becomes all the more meaningful when you've lived the bulk of your life without it. Through education and empowerment, individuals with autism can be free to go forward and have, hopefully, really, really great sex. Thank you.